Wayward Courier, Chapter 12. I was told that the pink one did something that defied all common sense. I've been to the Big Empty. I've seen things that don't make sense. Who in their right mind creates a building-sized warbot, let alone uses it? Really? Huh. Guess things don't make sense where you're from, either. What? Really? No, you're shitting me. After the confusion with Pinkie Pie was wisely swept under the rug, the ponies present quickly assaulted the human with a barrage of questions, all of which were initially unanswered due to the language barrier. Princess Celestia couldn't help but chuckle at the ponies as she set up a small translation field. In truth, she herself was eager to hear what he had to say. "Calm down, girls, calm down," she said serenely as the courier flinched from the sheer number of questions being shot at him. "Forgive them, they are simply eager." "How are they suddenly speaking English?" he asked, sounding very confused. "And what was that radiation spike?" "Princess Celestia cast a translation spell on all of us," Twilight explained. "I guess that would explain the small surge in thematic fallout." "Well, it stopped, so I guess it doesn't matter," he muttered. "I'm sorry, but how is thematic fallout relevant?" Rarity asked. "Because enough of that might just kill me." The courier paused, as though for dramatic effect. "If I'm lucky." There was silence. "If you're lucky?" Twilight asked. "What could be worse than dying?" The courier chuckled darkly. "Sorry, but I think you could do without the nightmares." He looked around. "Is there somewhere else we could go? Standing around talking isn't exactly appealing." "Of course," Celestia said calmly, leading the way to a rarely used council hall that was attached to the throne room. As they followed, the ponies couldn't help but wonder just what could be worse than dying. Celestia, though, had seen many beings succumb to demons, becoming prisoners in their own bodies, only able to watch helplessly as atrocities were committed. She shuddered internally at the memories. "Please, take a seat," she said as they entered the room, the guard remaining outside. The courier took the closest one, looking a little strangely at the high back it had. "Thanks." That confused me. They didn't need the backs to the chairs, but there they were. Turns out, they weren't the only sentient animals. I know. I figured it best not to think about it too much. It kinda hurt my head. My brain agreed with me about how strange that place is. "I suppose introductions are in order. I am Princess Celestia, one of the rulers of Equestria," the princess said, despite having told him in the dungeon. "You have already met Twilight Sparkle, Fluttershy, and Applejack." She gestured to the three ponies. "The others are Rainbow Dash, Rarity, and Pinkie Pie." They each waved a wing, inclined her head, and bounced respectively. There was a brief pause, as he took a breath. In truth, this was because the names were the strangest things he'd ever heard. "Well, I suppose you've all heard that I call myself the Courier by now. My actual name is Thomas. I am from the Mojave Wasteland, more specifically the city of New Vegas." "New Vegas?" Rainbow Dash asked loudly. "What happened to the old Vegas?" 200 years of abandonment after a nuclear war," he stated simply. "You live in 2-century-old ruins?" Celestia asked, while Rainbow tilted her head in confusion. "We don't have much choice," he shrugged. "It's either that or shacks made from whatever scraps you can get your hands on." "Why would anyone want to live in ruined buildings or shacks?" Rarity asked, clearly disgusted by the idea. "Beats sleeping outside," was all the courier had to say on the matter. "And even then, ruins can be death traps." "Well, they are ruins, that's kinda what they are." "I mean, just because they seem abandoned doesn't mean raiders or giant ants haven't taken up residence inside," he countered. "The last thing you want is to wake up to some drugged-up whack job slicing you open with a rusty knife." There was a stunned, disgusted, shocked silence. "And no, that hasn't happened to me. I've just heard stories that didn't do much to make things better. If possible, it made things worse." "Stories about..." Rarity looked ready to lose her latest meal. Pinkie Pie's mane had deflated. Fluttershy's eyes were threatening to roll into her head. Rainbow Dash was doing her best to hide all emotion, Applejack doing the exact opposite and letting her disgust and horror show for all the world to see. And Twilight Sparkle had her eyes closed, trying to get her brain to stop conjuring up those mental images. "What kind of place are you from?" The courier took a deep breath. "I won't try and sugarcoat this for you. The Mojave. It's terrible. There are whole towns struggling to survive. Gangs that rape and torture for fun are common. So are wild animals that want to tear you apart for a snack. If you can't defend yourself, you either pay someone who can or get killed." He looked at the group, the only member that seemed completely unfazed by what he was saying being the alicorn, walking along an old train track, can see you getting mauled to death by things that belong only in nightmares, or shot or held hostage, depends on your luck, he said with a shrug. "How can you speak so lightly of this?" the princess asked quietly. "When it's all you know, how else can you talk about it?" he asked back. "The only way to survive out there is to be prepared and able to kill everyone and everything that wants to kill you, something I am very good at. No, I don't regret saying what I did. They had to learn. The world is not sunshine and rainbows all day long. The fact that there were slavers operating 2 hours from a town is evidence enough. They did not thank me at all. Hell, I probably traumatized all of them, except the one with a horn and wings. She seemed sad. I guess, not sure why. The human's tales of what he had to do to survive were disheartening. Death, murder, and torture being so commonplace in a world was unheard of, even to her. She was saddened by what the residents of this Mojave wasteland had to go through. "But," Twilight said, her voice barely over a whisper, "what about the magic of friendship?" "Friendship?" he asked. "Friendship. You ask difficult questions, you know that?" He went quiet for a few moments. "Making friends is harder than you'd like. Sometimes it doesn't seem worth the effort. But when you do," a warm smile across his features, "you know you can put your life in their hands, and that they will put their own on the line to protect you." This went some way to make the ponies feel better. They all knew that they would do anything for their friends, and hearing that such things still existed, even if it was a small extent, in this wasteland he was from, made them feel better. "Where are all my things, anyway? I've still got a headache, and I had some painkillers with me," he said, looking around, abruptly changing the subject. Princess Celestia blinked, temporarily stunned by this. "I can send some pony to retrieve them. However, I ask that your weapons be kept non-operational." "Now that I won't agree to," he said. He raised a hand as the alicorn tried to speak. "I know you're saying that to keep the peace, but I am far from comfortable walking around in a place I am unfamiliar with, completely unarmed, without knowing what I'm getting into." He looked around. "At least you didn't hand them over to someone who has no idea what they're messing with." There was an uncomfortable silence as the 7 mortals in the room looked at the lone immortal, whose mouth was slightly open, wearing a sheepish expression. "You're shitting me," the courier said, staring at Celestia in disbelief. He stood up with an angry sigh. "Let's go find them before someone gets killed." Author's notes. And so the entire main 6 have been effectively traumatized. And someone should teach Princess Celestia about gun safety, huh? Fuck the language barrier. We have magic. Wayward Courier, Chapter 13. Princess Luna held the strange metal device in her telekinetic grip, rotating it slowly so she could better understand how it operated. It appeared to be an incredibly simple device, utilizing a trigger akin to those found on crossbows, a tube with a small bit of metal poking out of the center on the tip, and a rotating cylinder that contained 6 smaller cylinders. The grip of it was incredibly ornate, a golden bear a part of it, and there were words engraved on the sides of the tube, though what they said was a mystery to her. The revolving cylinder itself was a small work of art, an intricate design carved into the metal. What was most intriguing about the device was not what it was, but how it had been put together. It was clear that the parts were not crafted by one individual, or even several. The flawless way the whole thing was put together, and how uniform the parts were, was enough to indicate to her that this was mass-produced, though how she didn't know. Further evidence of this was found in the 6 smaller cylinders. True, they were not without their flaws, but it was clear that those flaws were the result of having been formed with some sort of machine, as opposed to by hoof, claw, or talon. The cylinder slid back into the device proper with a satisfying click. Luna looked over the other things that had been taken from the strange alien. While Celestia had taken care of the actual meeting with the being, she had been given his equipment, including his weapons. She trusted none of the other ponies, even the guards, with this. There was just no telling what could happen. She closed one eye and gazed down the small tube, trying to make sense of its purpose. She was so focused on this task that she failed to notice the door behind her opening, or the loud expletives that immediately followed. What she did notice was the thing being pulled out of her telekinesis and slammed into the table with a terrifyingly loud bang. "Never!" Some strange bipedal thing yelled at her. "Look down the barrel of a loaded gun." Can you believe that? Who looks down the barrel of a loaded gun? That's gun safety 101 right there. Huh? What? Was it something I said? Well, I may as well explain a bit about the place I was in. First, very white and clean. And by clean, I mean sterilized. Seriously, you could use the walls for mirrors in some places. They were that spotless. There was also a ton of guards as well, all wearing that shiny, clean armor, and standing around like statues. It was kind of creepy. At least with the Republic's heavy troopers and the Brotherhood paladins, you can understand what with them wearing helmets. These guys, you could see their faces, and every single one of them had this blank stare. It's like they were robots or something. I didn't see much of what was outside, but what I did see was clear and cloudless, as it had been when I went and saved those girls. As for the pony that was having a staring match with my Ch12, she was a lot like the white one, Celestia, horn and wings. Turns out they were sisters. Anyway, her coat, or fur, or whatever, was a deep purple, kind of like what you get on a moonless night. There was a patch that was even darker on her flank, and there was a crescent moon within that. Makes sense that her name is Luna, I suppose. Her mane and tail, that was like something out of Saturday morning kids shows from before the war. Black as cloudless night, and just as starry. Yeah, I said that. Honestly, her mane was filled with specks of light that really could be described as stars. It was really beautiful. And she was eyeballing the barrel of my Ch12, more specifically the end the bullets came out of. Luna just stared in shocked silence as the biped grabbed the things that had been identified as weapons and started pulling bits off, as though he was dismantling them. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked angrily. She received no answer. Thinking that she was being ignored, she switched to the royal Canterlot voice and old a question. "What dost thou think thou art doing?" The courier was pushed onto the table by the sheer force of the voice. He let out a short yelp when this happened. "What the fuck was that?" he exclaimed loudly as he pushed himself off the table. Unfortunately for everyone in the room, Luna was too upset to stop using the royal Canterlot voice, though she had returned to conventional speech. "We demand that you explain what you were doing." The courier turned to the gathered ponies he had entered the room with, all 7 of which Luna was still completely unaware of. What did she say, and why is she yelling? The princess of the night turned around and was greeted by the sight of the element bearers, covering their ears, and her sister wearing a smirk. "Oh," Luna said quietly, suddenly looking very sheepish. "I didn't see you there." "Do not worry about it, sister," Celestia said, still smiling. "You were simply too engrossed in what you were doing." "Thank goodness he pulled that thing away from you," Applejack muttered. "I don't want to know what that would have done to you, your highness." "Please, all of you, dispense with the pleasantries. You are my friends," Luna said with a warm smile. "And what would that strange device have done? I was told it was a weapon, but how it functions as one I cannot tell." "I'm not sure how either," Twilight Sparkles said, taking a step forward. "But he killed 6 diamond dogs with that one." She shuddered at the memory, as did Applejack. "I was not made aware of this," Luna said, turning to her sister. "The diamond dogs he fought had recently taken 3 young fillies as slaves. He only did what he did to rescue them," Celestia calmly explained. "I see." Luna faced the courier, who had watched this entire exchange in mild confusion, completely unaware of what was being said. He had the Ch12 in his lap. "Please explain how that device operates," she commanded, pointing at him with a hoof. There was a short silence. "He can't understand me, can he?" she asked, thoroughly unamused. "Can any one of you translate for us?" the courier asked. Turns out this Luna is capable of amplifying her voice so much that it can actually be weaponized. Kinda like a sonic emitter that can't fry electronics. Well, okay, not really. So I ended up getting roped into giving a weapons demonstration. I know, downright crazy. I was not happy with the idea, mainly because I didn't have much in the way of spare primers, powder, or lead. But how can you say no to a group that can pump enough radiation to irradiate the whole of Nevada? So long story short, we figured out the language barrier problem again. They led me somewhere I could shoot without hitting someone, and they watched. Shame they didn't properly compensate for the penetration. The 8 ponies watched from a safe distance as the courier looked down the sights of his sequela. They had taken him to a small part of the guard's barracks, and had set up a target in the form of a spare set of guard armor. Behind the target was a wall, a recent addition to the building and therefore made of plaster instead of stone. Suddenly, a noise akin to thunder was heard, along with a short scream. At first, the princesses thought that one of the castle's weather ponies had lost control of their cloud. But they were proven wrong when Twilight Sparkle began muttering. It tore right through. The 7 others took a closer look at the armor and saw that it had not only put a hole in the plating on one side, there was a second hole through the other side and a third in the wall. That is really weak metal. The courier commented. You let your guards wear that? He asked. What was that scream? Rarity asked, trying to pat down her mane where some had sprung up in shock. As though to answer her question, pained moaning could be heard from the other side of the wall. All 9 occupants of the room looked at each other. Well, fuck, was all the courier had to say on the matter.